Hello.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Yay.
Thank you. This is the fourth and last of my series of talks on objects from the Mollie and Lewis Kaplan Museum of Judaica at Beth Yeshurun. Some of you are out of town, so when you come into town, you'll come and see it. And some of you are in town and have not gone in to see that museum, and you really ought to. The collection, guys, is fabulous. I can't begin to show you all the pieces that we have related to this morning's subject, which is Hanukah and Purim. So we're going to start with Hanukah. The menorah, as described in Shemot, Book of Exodus, a gold lampstand on a base with 3 branches from each side. Here you see them, 3 branches from each side. 3 cups are shaped like almond blossoms on each of the stems, and 4 on each of the branches, and 4 on the stem, and that is a menorah. This is, of course, the famous picture of the Arch of Titus that we Jews are not supposed to cross under, but you can photograph it from an angle, and you can see the Romans carrying the spoils from our temple into Rome, showing the menorah from the temple. Very similar to this picture here. And our museum happens to have a menorah by Musher Oved. This is a menorah, 7 branches. I don't have to tell you that this is a Hanukah. It's not a menorah. This one has 8 branches and an extra one for a shamash. And I want to talk really briefly about where this comes from, just to remind you. So under Antiochus IV, and with the encouragement from Hellenizing Jews who were anxious to reject Judaism, the temple was defiled. They sacrificed pigs to Roman gods. This is in the 2nd century before the Common Era. In 167 BCE, Mattathias and his sons, foremost of whom is Judas Maccabeus, began an uprising. It's astonishing, beginning in the little town of Modin, as his family is rebelling against the Roman Empire. And in 164 before the Common Era, they actually recaptured the temple and they rededicated it in a ceremony based on Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. They had sacrifices for 8 days. No candles, no menorahs. The menorah was still a 7-branched candelabrum. No mention of 8 lights or lamps or anything else. Josephus, writing about 150 years later, used the word festival of lights to describe Hanukkah, and that may have been seasonal. Maybe they all were lighting lights, one doesn't know. The story about the little cruse of oil that lasted for 8 days that we all learned in Hebrew school, that was written in the Talmud in 350 or 400, around the time the Talmud was redacted, 350 to 400 CE. It's 500 years after the events. Hanukkah was originally celebrated with 8 oil lamps. The oldest example of what we would consider a Hanukkah menorah, that's a Hanukah, is from the 8th century, and that's shown in Encyclopedia Judaica. The Kaplan Museum does have an astonishing collection of Hanukkah menorahs from 1700 up to the present time, and I'm going to try to show you some of those today. A lot of interesting features about them. So again, this is a Hanukkah menorah or a Hanukah. I like the phrase Hanukkah menorah. This may not, oh, I'm sorry. This one is from the 18th century, Polish. And for any large object, this is huge. This thing is 3 feet tall. You may have seen it in the museum case. Weighs about a ton. I can barely pick it up. For a large brass piece like this to survive is very unusual, because the Russian or Polish armies would take whatever brass they could find to make cannons. This one,
Daniel?
Yeah.
May I interrupt for a moment? Could you go back to the Polish one again, please? What are the decorations on the
Nice. Leslie, thank you for asking. These are the little almond blossoms. Thank you for reminding me, so you can see. Thank you. Look, the little
Okay.
flowers. This is reminiscent of the original temple menorah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This one is rare. You've probably never seen a round menorah. This one is 18th century, also Polish brass, and it's round, exceedingly rare. There's almost none like this anywhere around in our museum. Here is a typical Ashkenazic 18th century brass menorah. The wells are hidden in here, but there are 8 wells. You can see them behind that barrier. And it's got columns reminiscent of the temple, very frequent decoration in all Judaica. Got some pretty little animals, because we just did that. And look what it has. It's got place for 2 Shabbat candles. So every family couldn't have their own separate candlesticks and Hanukkah menorahs. So they have a place for lighting Shabbat candles every week, and they use it for a menorah during Hanukkah. Now, this Ashkenazic menorah is like Hanukkah menorahs, like the ones many of us have. Look, it stands. 4 legs, it's standing up. Why is that important? This is a Mizrahi menorah. The Mizrahi are the Jews who lived in Arab lands. They're the ones who established communities in 586 before the Common Era, with the Exodus from when they were forced out of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. And this one, 18th century Mizrahi Hanukkah menorah. It doesn't have legs, guys. It doesn't stand up. Furthermore, it's got this big ring on the top. The Mizrahi Jews, to display the miracle, didn't put a Hanukkah menorah in the window the way we do, standing up. They put it on the doorpost opposite the mezuzah. And in fact, it says down here,
Daniel,
Daniel, we can't hear you so well.
your speaker is crackling again.
Samantha, you fixed that last time. Can you fix it again?
Well, I think last time you signed out and then you joined back in again. So you want to try doing that? Leave the meeting and then come back in?
Yeah, this turning this loud doesn't help, does it? Still crackles.
No, it still doesn't sound good.
It's not audible.
Back. Let me see if I can do
Okay. Sorry, everybody. Hang on.
Sign out. God help me. Oh, I don't know what to do. Samantha, how do I sign out? And show, and this, and Zoom.
In the
Look for
bottom,
leave meeting.
yeah, in the bottom right, go to leave meeting.
I think I can do it for you, Daniel. Let me see if I can. I'm going to remove you from the meeting. So just come back in. Oh, no. All right, well, let him come back and hopefully this will work. Sorry, everybody.
Hi, Paul and Steve.
That's a good walk. Yeah. Yeah, I have to be
Can you hear me now, everybody?
Yes, now it's good for me.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
it's
much
clear.
better.
Yes, very good.
Sorry, very sorry for that. All right. So I was talking about an
Mizrahi.
Mizrahi.
Yeah, so you'll just need to share your screen again.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
I don't know how to do this, guys. This is awful. End show.
Daniel, just move your pointer to the bottom of the screen and where it says share screen, click on that.
And see, I've got to be on my Zoom to do that.
Yes.
Show all.
There it is. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Thank you. Is it there now?
Yes, there's a
I'll enlarge it, but you can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
there's a drawing on it.
Okay,
Now
Okay.
thank you.
it's there. Now it's there.
I again apologize. Really, I've
No
lost
problem. It
I'm
looks
all-
great.
No problem.
valuable minutes from my talk. So it was hung on the doorpost to display the miracle, and that explains the Baruch atah b'voecha, Baruch atah b'seitecha. Blessed are you when you're coming in, and blessed are you when you're going out, because it's on the doorpost, folks. And what is this in the center? This is like a Shaviti plaque from the Psalms. I've always set before me the Lord, and since I have had the wonderful consultant, an expert with a perfect photographic memory, all I've got to do is hand this to Rabbi Jack Siegel, and he can tell us exactly which psalm is depicted on each one of the branches of that beautiful Hanukah menorah. So it's all text from the Psalms, and it's all identifiable. Notice also, I mentioned before, we have this in our image. We have birds, we have animals in it's the constant themes in our decorations of Judaica to make them more beautiful. This is an early 18th century Mizrahi Hanukah menorah. It's a gorgeous piece. The one to the left, the photograph isn't very good. I'm sorry about it, and I couldn't get back in the DY to rephotograph. The one to the left is one that we have. It came with Rabbi Isaac Tobin's collection, and it's probably from Iraq or Syria from the 18th century. And in case you wondered whether that looked like something real, here I took a picture of the one in my Encyclopedia Judaica. It's attributed to Baghdad, the 18th century, in the Israel Museum, looking quite identical. So this is an 18th century Mizrahi Hanukah menorah. The glasses are new. They made a new set of glasses. I don't know what kinds of glass they originally had. The glass would hold oil and the wick would come out the top.
Daniel,
Yes.
did the Mizrahi in those countries, do they have the same issues with not being able to have Jewish artisans creating
No.
things?
Good question. Very good question. I mentioned in previous talks, especially where silver work was concerned, there were limitations who was allowed to work with silver. Germany would not allow, Austria would not allow Jews to serve as silversmiths. So Jewish person had to go to a Christian silversmith, and that's why all those errors appear in the work. We were allowed to be silversmiths in Muslim countries. All right.
Daniel,
Yes.
I had a brief question about the Iraqi Mizrahi one just before you. Looking at the photograph on the left where your fist is, I guess, just below it is a symbol, and it looks like to me a moon and a star.
Yep.
What is that?
Just a decoration. It's not an Arab symbol of a crescent moon. It's just a decoration, Daniel.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you a few of the different kinds of Hanukah menorahs that we have. I happen to love this one. It's simple, it's pewter, it's from 1756. You can see it was made for Yitzchak ben Yisachar HaKohen, and the year is given on here. And it's just a very ordinary piece, pewter, but simple, and I do love the thing. This is very, very unusual, and the same thing exists in the Jewish Museum in New York. Brass, 18th century Italy. The back plate may be a recast of a much older piece. It shows what? You couldn't guess, so I'm going to tell you, but I will put it there to make you think about it. It looks like it's a person sitting down and looking at three women, and believe it or not, it's said to be the Judgment of Paris. And who knows why it got turned into a Hanukah menorah or when, but this is a 19th century, early 19th century Italian Hanukah menorah. The identical piece is in the Jewish Museum, and it's actually in there, the published text of Hanukah menorahs from the Jewish Museum. So it's one of the most unusual ones that we have. Now, I love this one. We acquired it just last year from the Steinharts. We bought it at auction, and when it arrived, it had a catalog number in back of it, and that's what I called the auctioneer and said, it's got a catalog number. Whose collection did it come from? And the guy said, didn't you know that was Steinhart's collection? So the Michael Steinhart sold off his collection, and this beautiful little, it's small, it's a pottery Hanukah menorah. It was made, it's folk art, guys. It was made by some family. You can see it's been cracked and repaired. Crack goes all the way through. And when we took it out of the box, Lisa Unsel looks at it and says, you can also see that it was used. How do you know it was used?
It's charred.
Because it's charred more, and it's charred more on the right side, because this is where you put the first candle and the second and third. More charred more over here than it is over here. Exactly right. And just you think about all the destruction and all the disruption of life in Europe, and for something from the mid-19th century this fragile to survive at all, I think is remarkable. By the way, one could hang this on the wall if one wished. It was made to be hung on a wall if you wanted to do it, although it is an Ashkenazic Hanukah menorah, and it stands up. So this is mid-19th century.
Daniel,
Yeah.
do you think there's any chance that this was some little kid's Sunday school project?
It's a very fair question. I have my mother's that she made as a teenager in the workshop of Tamima Ghazari, and it's gorgeous. And this very well might have been. It might have been something.
Is there a shamus on it? On top?
Yes, there is. The shamus is here. And by the way, I don't know. This is not a movable shamus, so I don't know how they did this. I really don't. A lot of them, the shamus isn't movable. So you got me. You know, you use the shamus to light something, to light the wick. I don't know. This, I show you, it doesn't look like much, but it's only about 4 inches tall, 5 inches tall. And it reminds us, it's silver, it's from Austria, mid-19th century. And it reminds us that we Jews often were merchants, we were traveling, and we would take, just I showed you miniature Torah, we would carry it. I showed you folding, traveling candlesticks for the women. The men were doing most of the traveling because they were merchants. They would travel with their own little Hanukah. So this very beautiful one is small. I think it's about 5 inches, 6 inches tall.
Daniel,
Yeah.
where is the, on that small menorah, where is the
How much
shamus?
is missing? Thank you very much, Leslie. It's
Oh.
missing. There's a little place right here, a little stand inserted into that, and it's missing.
Oh, okay, thank
When
you.
it came to us, very good observation. When it came to us, it was missing. Now, speaking of miniatures, this one is tiny, Look at the size of it. What would anybody do with a Hanukkah menorah that size? Guys, I didn't have time to do this. Have you traveled in Holland or in Europe and seen those doll houses from the 18th and 19th century? They're 6, 7 feet high. They have little tiny Persian rugs. They've got little paintings on the wall. This is from one of those doll houses. It's just, you can see the size compared to a dime. It is just tiny. But anyway, that's on the subject of miniature Hanukkah menorahs. Now,
And
highlight.
where would they find the candles?
What?
Where would they find candles that small?
They didn't. I'm sure it was just sitting there for decoration. I'm sure nobody ever lit this thing. It was just sitting there for decoration. How do you like this? Is this amazing? So, once again, you've got 8 wells. You've got a shamash, and this is called chinoiserie. It was made in England in the late 19th century when Oriental art was very fashionable, very popular, and they would try to imitate the Chinese style. But it is English, and it's been damaged and repaired. William Gross looked at it and said, it's not a Hanukah at all. Well, I don't know. What else would it be? It looks exactly like a Hanukah. It's got 8 cups. Rabbi Isaac Tobin thought it was a Hanukah. So, you get different opinions from different experts. I think it's a Hanukah. I love the piece. It's really, really unusual. Never seen anything else like this anywhere. Now, if you were sort of ordinary middle class, you lived in Poland in the 1920s, and you couldn't afford a beautiful sterling silver Hanukkah menorah, this is what you would have had. So it's brass, very thin brass. Believe me, it's this stuff you could bend it easily, and it's tin on the background. It's got 8 wells. Where is the shamash? I think the shamash is again missing, supposed to hook in here. It's got palm trees and lions. It's got a crown, Keter Torah. It's fanciful. This is a Hanukkah menorah from Poland from the 1920s. This is what you would use for an ordinary middle class, lower middle class family would have this for their Hanukkah menorah.
Daniel, it looks to me like there's a place to attach a shamash right at the base of the crown. See, there's a little fixture there.
Yeah,
it
right.
looks like that's where it was.
That's where it went. That's where it went, right there. Thank you. Here you have 2 more from about the same period. The one to the left is a Betzalel Hanukkah menorah. We talked about Betzalel last week or 2 weeks ago. Boris Schatz went from Russia to Paris to Jerusalem to establish a school that would make Jewish art for Jewish purposes. And much of the work that was done in the Betzalel school in those early years was in this very highly ornate Art Deco style. And that's what you have here in this Hanukah that we were able to acquire. We bought this one at Sotheby's just last year. This is another that, so this is from the 1920s, and this one's from the 1920s. So you've seen 3. The previous one was from Poland. And these 2, this is from Mandate Palestine or Israel, and so is this one, interestingly. Very, very different in style, because this is the typical Betzalel school style as established by Boris Schatz. This was made in the workshop of a man named Beer, B-I-E-R, who it's made Yud Resh to be exact. And this is bronze, very simple. So it's not this fancy ornate style, but it's a very lovely Hanukkah menorah. Very, very nice indeed. You can see it's been repaired because one of the wells has been replaced. Now, I saved the most ornate elaborate and valuable ones for last in the Hanukah menorahs before we move on to Purim. This one is from the 18th century in Poland. It's fabulously valuable. I'm not going to quote the sum of money. And it is because of the tremendous amount of workmanship and the age and the preservation. It has columns and perhaps doors that open to an ark from a modern synagogue, or perhaps this is what they thought the temple doors looked like. But these are standard motifs in Jewish work. And here's where the shamash goes right here. And you can have two shamash if you want. You want another one, but that comes out. That could be a shamash. And the interesting thing about this one is that the back is also highly decorated. Oh, there it is up close. Look at that workmanship. I mean, this is an astonishing piece, guys. Most extraordinary piece. And the back is also highly engraved. I've never seen another Hanukah menorah like this. This one's considered very, very rare. Let me just see. I thought I had an enlarged version of that, but you can see that it's got extensive, oh, here it is, extensive designs all the way through. So that one is probably Polish from the mid 1700s. Yeah, Leslie. You got to unmute, Leslie.
I was noticing on the back of this menorah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, the back of the menorah, if you look at the base of those columns and the floor there, the floor is made up of squares.
Yep.
But the squares go back in perspective. Can you see that?
Absolutely. I'm pointing it out to everybody. Very nice.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. You can also see
that's very unusual.
you can also see what holds it together. I mean,
yes.
Okay. So that's one of these. That's one of
Daniel?
Yes.
Daniel, is it gilded silver?
It's gilded. It's silver and it's gilded. Yes.
It's gilded. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now this one is even more amazing. And if you take it, first of all, it is a Hanukah. There's a shamash, and there are 8 lions. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 missing, and the 8th one. And actually, we're having by using 3D Xerox technology, we have a silver one that's finally going to fit in here. We let out one of these to have a copy made in silver, so it'll be replaced. This one was made in Russia, it's dated inside. It's the 1720s, and it again is probably modeled on what they thought was the temple. There are columns. There's the rounded door. It's a very bad photograph, guys. I couldn't get into BY to get a better photograph of it. This thing stands, I don't know, 2 feet tall, and it's just as astonishing. I don't know if it ever was used. The lion's mouths, see a little hole in the lion's mouth? The head of the lion opens, believe it or not, and you can pour oil into all these lions, and you can stick a wick in there, and the wick comes out. I have no idea if this thing was ever used. I can tell you it is an amazing piece with an amazing value placed on it, and it's from 1820 something or other. Carol has the date. I just don't have them all in my head. I'm sorry.
It also has I guess it's on the other side. There's a clock that's circle at the top. It's like a clock tower on one side.
So it's a little hard to say whether somebody just assembled some stuff or whatever it is, but the date is in it. So that's just, and guys, this is just some of the range of Hanukah menorahs that the museum has. There's just a bunch more of them. We'll put some of these, a number of these are already out, Starting in November, we'll put out some more in other cases, but it's very, very broad collection. And all I can do is ask you to come in and have a look and see, because I couldn't show you all these things.
Again, is that gilded silver?
No, this is unpolished silver. What we've done with the works that we have, first of all, to polish something like this would take somebody a day or two. And because it's so fragile, it would probably damage it. So we sent it out to an expert metal worker in Houston who basically took it apart and coated it so it shouldn't tarnish, and put it back together. And we have it, and it really does look silver now. This was taken before that was done. Yeah, Leslie.
Daniel, on the lower level of the gate, in the right-hand corner, looks like a pole, or it's leaning against something. Is that a piece of equipment to use to light the menorah?
No, this is just a lamp. Here's the shamash is really here, honestly.
Leslie, it looks to me like they were trying to create a little scene down there. There's a little man.
Yeah.
And I think it's just sort of like a street light.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So it looks like people are just down there talking, or I mean, what is this like? I can't really see at the bottom. What is it like down there?
Okay, guys, I'm plunging on Purim. Okay. There was a biblical opposition, historical opposition to portraying any human figures on religious objects. Mosaics from the 3rd century of the Common Era showed that the artists won out over the rabbis. Are you all familiar with the Dura Europos? That is a structure that was originally a fortress in eastern Syria. And one section of it was made into a synagogue. Extensive wall decorations depicting biblical scenes. And this was all completed by about 260, when it was just left in ruins. And I'm sorry to say that the Muslim extremists caused some amount of damage to it. Otherwise, it had sat there largely unchanged since about 267. There's extensive wall illustrations of biblical scenes. So you can't say that we never showed scenes depicting human beings or depicting biblical scenes or whatever. Exceptions for religious illustrations were Haggadot, and I showed you some of those, and especially Megillot. They were always very, very highly illuminated. And maybe that's because the Megillot Esther is the one book in the Bible that doesn't have God's name, or maybe that's just because Purim was supposed to be fun, or who knows what. But Megillas, as we call them, Megillot Esther, the Megillas were illuminated. So here we have a very beautiful mid-18th century Italian Megillot Esther. Now, remember when I showed you the Italian ketubah, I commented on how columns were especially characteristic of the Sephardic design or illumination of manuscripts. And here you see that. Interesting thing is, you look at these fanciful animals. There's not even a name for such kind of an animal as this. It's sort of a human figure. You've got some very elaborate birds. Maybe they're hoopoes because they've got crowns on them. Beautiful, beautiful ornamentation on this thing. This is from mid-1700s, a Sephardic and Italian Megillot Esther. Here it is up close. You can see it's obviously aged, but it's in beautiful condition, and it's a beautiful piece. Here's some of these fanciful. You might consider that's a lion, but you got no idea what that thing is, or that, and those are the birds, and who knows? Very, very beautiful, very artistic. Now,
Do we know where it's from?
Italy,
Oh, Italy.
18th
Which
century.
part?
No. Oh, excuse me. I'll take that back. I showed you in the ketubas that this, the pictures are in the way, this kind of an ending on a ketuba was characteristic of ones from Rome. And I don't know why the Romans did that, and it's possible, it's a good question, and it's possible this thing is Roman. I don't know. I haven't asked anyone else, and Rabbi Tobin didn't comment. This is simply a gorgeous, huge Megillah. When they're very tall, they have fewer columns. It generally indicates a much greater expense in getting the parchment, and it is simply a beautiful Megillah. On the top, I needed to go in with a really, really fancy camera to photograph these things. I tried to enlarge them, but I can't show you. They're called finials, just designs with the finest lines. This is just a zillion little fine lines. And again, this is done with a goose quill pen and ink. And it's hard to imagine that anybody could make anything like this, but it really is beautiful. Also notice about this Megillah, I chose to show you this in the middle rather than the opening column, because on certain Megillot, every column begins with the word Hamelech. So I couldn't show you all the columns, but except for the opening column and the one that has the sons of Haman, every column has Hamelech. And that means that the scribe has got to be particularly careful in spacing the thing out and planning it. So he's going to end up with the word Hamelech at the top of each column. This is Polish from the mid-19th century. The Hecht family recently donated that in honor of the Hecht's 60th wedding anniversary. It's gilded silver with very, very fine filigree overlying it. And the scroll is in quite good condition. It's just a particularly beautiful 19th century European Megillah. This one is Bezalel School. And you can see here, it says Megillat Esther. And I think it says Shaul ben David, but it doesn't give his whole name. It's just got the shin with the period. And he was one of their best known artists. And it's, again, very, very highly decorated in this, very, very ornate fashion, which is characteristic of the Bezalel school. So we had a visiting scholar named Shalom Sabar, who came from Israel, and he actually wrote a scholarly article on this piece. But he told me something that was disturbing. He said to me, this is a stolen piece. And he said that he had heard from the widow of the artist that the thing was stolen from her home. And that was kind of upsetting to me. I didn't know if I should confess it or not. However, when we had Sharon Mintz come and lecture a few years ago, remember, she's the one who's the curator for Judaica at the seminary, and she's also the one who is the consultant to Sotheby's. So she picks what goes in Sotheby's auctions. She said, Daniel, she says, believe it or not, this is imprinted on parchment. So it's not handwritten. Somebody got these pieces of parchment, sewed them together, and printed it on by a printing process. And then the illustrations, the colors, were filled in by hand. And she showed me an example of one that had no coloring in it and another one that had different coloring in it. So it's very interesting that it is a Bezalel piece, but it's not a proper Megillah because it's not handwritten on parchment. And as I say, it fooled Shalom Sabar. It obviously fooled me. This is just a fanciful castle, also Bezalel. And underneath, what you can't see is the winding mechanism. So after you've pulled the thing out, you pull it out from here to read it, there's a winder on the underneath, and you wind it back up. And this was made about 1930. This one is also particularly unusual. I don't know how many of you were given a Megillah printed on paper when you were in Hebrew school. Miriam and I were, so we could follow along the Megillah when it was being read. This is a full Megillah that's there printed on paper, and it's done in an art. It's kind of a art deco style. And here, this one says, "Kacha yaseh la'ish." This thus shall be done to the man that the king wishes to honor. And so it's got these marvelous illustrations scattered through it. Especially interesting about this piece is that it was printed in Germany in 1938. Elaine Kaplan brought it in. I believe it belonged to her grandfather, who got out of Germany, and it must have gotten out pretty late because this thing is dated. It's got a date of publication on it, 1938. So he didn't get out very early. But this is what was given to the kids to follow the Megillah reading, to the adults also. How many of you had those in your shul when you were growing up? Raise your hand. Anybody had those? Sandy, Leslie, you didn't? Mim and I did. Okay. Here's a little teeny tiny one. So this is Yemenite, and it's got a gold background, pretty illustrations, and it's kind of primitive printing. It's probably made in Israel by Mizrahi Jews in Palestine in the first part of the 20th century. Very small, but I think it's very lovely, and I just wanted to show it to you so you see the range of Megillot that
Is that one hand printed, or is that a?
Oh, this hand done. This is hand done.
That's what I thought. Okay.
No question. This one's hand done.
Also, Daniel.
Yeah.
Once the Megillah is in the container and the lid is put on, can that also double as a noisemaker?
No, it doesn't. In fact, this is a typical Mizrahi or Arab amulet. People wear these things around their neck, and we have a parchment amulet that we have hanging in the museum. I unrolled it, but it goes inside these things, so people will carry them around as amulets also.
Oh, amazing!
I'm not sure this whole thing was supposed to go together. I think somebody might just have put it together. This is a very large one. It goes to show you again how we Jews have illuminated the Megillot Esther. This is it's a scroll we read from in shul, but it's got all kinds of illustrations on it. And this was made by Yakin, who's a Israeli artist. It was made in the 1970s, but it's a very beautiful scroll, beautiful print. It is not a Hamelech scroll. You notice first word in every column is, here you have, well, you got a couple. Hamelech. I think I see this one doesn't ever begin with Hamelech, but I think the scribe ran out of effort and didn't complete it. Hamelech scroll. Okay, I got more to show you from Purim. A few more kinds of items. Groggers. If you were very old like me, you didn't even have one like this, because this is even older. These are from about 1910 or 1915. Just plain ordinary tin Groggers with wood. The photograph's not very good, I'm sorry. But this is the kind of noisemaker handed out at the beginning of the last century. Here's one. It's tarnished, because again, I couldn't get back in and photograph the polished ones. This is sterling silver. And this is made by, oh my gosh, I blocked the name of the artist, guys. But look what it shows. Remember, on Purim, you're supposed to drink so much that you don't know Mordechai from Haman. And here you see a rabbi with this big drunken smile on his face, and he has been drinking. Now, what this goat is doing, I got no idea. And it doesn't make a whole lot of noise, but it's a big sterling silver grogger. This one is an artistic version. An artist made this in the late 1960s, and it's just made with many different kinds of wood. It's got little metal pieces here that jangle, and when you rotate it, it's a noisemaker. And I'm sorry, again, I don't have a better picture of it. So I'll go on now and show you a couple of other Purim objects, and then we'll wrap it up. This one. I told you about Moshe Oved. He was the great British Judaic craftsman in the beginning of the century. This piece is so important, he actually mentioned it in his autobiography, his memoir. And Carol Emery, do you remember what year this was made? It says it in the book. I'm sorry, guys. I
don't. I'm sorry.
It's late 1920s. It's an absolutely amazing piece. Oh, Carrie, my Carol's going to be looking it up in the catalog. It'll say in the catalog. The board is constructed with little semi-precious stones. The pieces themselves are all silvers. Half are gilded and half are not. And I'll show you a close-up view. The king and queen have either diamonds for their eyes or rubies for their eyes, depending on whether it's the black ones or the red ones. And cut out are actual words from the Megillah. Vayhi omein et Hadassah hi Esther. It's talking about Mordechai. He raised Hadassah. Her name was Esther. And then he skips, the artist skips a few words. I don't know why. She was beautiful, the Tovat Mareh, beautiful to look upon. And around four sides, you have this wonderful brass cutouts of quotes from the book of Esther. So you have a very foolish looking king and a queen, and you've got a rook that actually shows the artist leaning out. He says this in his memoir, that's how you know it. He's leaning out and pointing down as if he's saying, time to make the next move. And instead of the bishop, you got a rabbi. Let me see if I got a close-up of this. I got some kind of a close-up. So the bishop looks like a rabbi. The king has diamonds. On this side has diamonds for his eyes. The queen has diamonds. On the other side, it's rubies. And for a knight, it's a horse with a turtle on the back, and there's something in our legends about that. Guys, I'm sorry. I've been working very hard. I didn't have time to research everything. All this stuff has its symbolism, but this is an extraordinary piece by Moshe Oved, and he considered it so important, he put it in his autobiography, a description of it.
The entire chessboard, there's a drawer that fits underneath that all the pieces go into.
Holds all the pieces, yeah. It's first half of the 20th century. However, it's 1930, maybe 1940, who knows. Moshe Oved died in 1958. He was born in 1882 or 3, so he lived a long time. Now, this is a plate for collecting shalach manos. In the book of Esther, I'll remind you, I think it's in chapter 8. It's a day for observing and a day for giving gifts to the poor, mishloach manos or shalach manos. And I do remember that when Mr. Schwartz ran the chapel service, he always had a plate at the back of the chapel on Purim, in addition to the money put into the pushki, which was always passed around in the chapel. There was this plate like this. This is 18th century. This is a particularly rare and unusual one. It's in pewter, decorated with verses from the Megillah. But he would, when I first came in the 1970s, he would ask people to put a $50. Remember, there used to be $50? Some of you are old enough to remember $50. And that was a chatzi shekel, because that's reminiscent of the section in Kitasa that talks about everyone contributes a half a shekel to the building of the sanctuary, and that one of those sections is read on Purim. But at any rate, this is to collect money for the poor, for Mishloach Manot, for Shalach Manos, for the poor, collected on Purim. 18th century, Eastern Europe, pewter Shalach Manos plate.
Okay. Daniel,
Yeah.
how long have pushki plates or whatever been around, and has it always been like the pass the plate type to collect money?
Very interesting. So I'll tell you, when I originally planned this talk, and if you saw an early announcement of the title, it was going to be, no, I guess it was the second one. It was going to be, it came out life cycle events, but it was going to be ordinary everyday life. So if next year I'm allowed, we have a marvelous collection of pushkins in the museum also from the 18th and 19th century. So that tradition's been around a long time. This is a Purim plaque. And it was put up and people, again, the photograph isn't good. There are light shadows in it. I photographed it hurriedly, but it was made in Yugoslavia in about 1910. And it says, Mishenichnas Adar, when the month of Adar comes in, Marbin B'Simcha, happiness increases or multiplies. And that's, of course, because Adar has the festival of the holiday of Purim in it. And instead of saying Mazal Tov, it says Mazal Adar. And in case you didn't recognize the fish, it says Dagim, fishes. And the letters are shaped like fish. And here's a fish on the table. And fish is a very Jewish, it's a traditional symbol of plenty or of happiness. I think I mentioned that in one of the former talks. And remember when the Israelites left Egypt, they were kvetching about all the wonderful fish that they had to eat in Egypt, and they didn't have anything in the desert. They weren't eating such wonderful fish in Egypt, I'm sure, when they were building pyramids for the pharaohs. So this is a Purim plaque from Slovakia, 1910, a very, very unusual piece. We obtained this one from Bill Gross's collection.
Daniel, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the menorahs. Those kind of look like Hanukah. They have 8.
Yep. Okay. I'm told time's up. Okay. At any rate, it sure does look like it has a Hanukah on it.
I never noticed it before.
It does. It's got lions up here. So at any rate, for Purim, we had Purim plaque, we had Shalach Manos plate, we had Groggers, we had Megillot from various ages. For Hanukkah, we had mainly Hanukkah menorahs. That's what we had for those two holidays in the museum. Up here, this is a Shaviti. This is the opening that psalm from a Shaviti plaque. I put God always before me. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. That's just a fraction of what our Judaica Museum has. And as I say, if Rabbi Safran invites you back next year, I'll talk about things like pushkas and ordinary everyday stuff. And
you're invited.
Right? Okay. We've got Torah ornaments. We've got all kinds of stuff in that museum. Thank you all for coming and participating, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. This was great. Thank you
so much.
Bye.
Really enjoyed it.
That was pretty good.
Thank you,
Thank you, David.
Daniel.
You're
Daniel,
welcome. You're welcome. Oh,
Well, thank
Rabbi.
you very much.
yes, I've been here all the time.
Thank you.
Hey, Rabbi.
As I made mention in the fact to you, and I hope you got my email, the dots on top of the Shin Yud Lamed Tov is for the date. And
Yeah,
this comes
Rabbi.
out to about 70 years ago, this comes out. Did you get my email?
I did, Rabbi, and I didn't mention it. I had already
No, you
talked.
don't have to mention it. And it's Shiviti Adonai Lenegdi Tamid.
Yeah, that's what's
God,
on.
I always have God before me all the time.
So in previous
Dylan.
talks, I mentioned that when there are dots over the letters, it often indicates you're supposed to
Right.
add them up and get a numeric value, and that's how
Dots
you
over
take.
the letter tell you what year it is.
But this, if you add those up, it does come out to something like 1950s or 60s or 70s. It just is much older. So
No, it comes out perfectly.
No,
What year
it's
did
from
you say it
1910.
was?
It's from 1910. This piece.
1910? No,
Yeah.
it comes out to, let me figure it out. I need a pen over here. I got a pen in my pocket over here. Hold tight. Wait a minute. Okay. Kufay Sheen is 300. Tov is 400. That's 700. 710. And this is now, what year are we now in? 57?
80.
Right?
Yeah. So you see, it makes it something like 70 years ago, and it's much older than that. That's why those dots. I think they just.
So it's 70 years ago. So this is 70 years ago, which would be 50. It would be 1950.
Yeah.
Who told you it was 1910?
The world's greatest expert on Jewish manuscripts.
Ask him again. You
Right.
call him and ask him what the dots mean, because I don't see. No, wait a minute. I don't see a dot on the Lamed. Do you see a dot on the Lamed?
Yeah, sort of. I'm not sure.
Well, if there's a dot on the Lamed, then you have to add 30 more years to that. So you gotta go back 30 more years.
So you mean if there's no dot on the Lamed, then it's 30 years less. So it's 30 years before.
Then-
Or maybe.
If there's no dot on the Lamed, then it would be 5710. It would be 5710. So it'd be 70 years ago. If there's a dot on the Lamed, it would be 30 more years going back. So it'd be 100 years ago. So it would be 2020. It would be 100 years ago. So it would be 56.
Could be 1920.
It would be 5680.
I will write to William Gross and ask him.
Yeah, ask him if there's a dot on the Lamed.
I think
I cannot see it. I mean, I don't know.
Rabbi,
The
I
other
think you're
dots
right.
are pretty clear. I don't see a clear one. There are many letters that don't have a dot on it when they have this, because the quotation from Tillim is just Shiviti Adonai Tamid. You know, if you want.
So if you date it without a dot on the Lamed, it works out to be about 19.
There's no dot on the Lamed. It's 70 years. It's 70 years ago. If it's a dot on the Lamed, it's 100 years ago.
If there's no dot, if there's no dot on the Lamed, it's 100 years ago, which would make it 1920. And you know something? I'm going to bet you're right. I'm going to bet you William Gross.
No, that's if there is a dot on the Lamed. If there is a dot on the Lamed, it's 1920. If there's no dot on the Lamed, it's
There's no dot on
1950.
that Lamed.
Just ask him.
I thank
It's only
you
a
all for
55-cent stamp or a email.
Email, Rabbi, email. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Very good
Bye.
talk.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Rabbi Siegel.
Thank you.
I couldn't get it.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. Bye-bye, Rabbi Siegel.
Toda rabba. Toda rabba. Thank you very much.
Who is that?
Carol, right next to Daniel.
How do I exit? How do I exit? Right
I see, yes, here.
Sharing with you.
there.
We don't have.
Great, Daniel. Thank you.